Alrighty then, we are back for another magnificent Terran Tuesday. I hope everything is going well wherever you are in the world, but you have joined me, James, the literary sandwich. That's what I'll call myself today, and the Black Knight. And hopefully R.H. Snow will be joining us momentarily. But how are you doing? How are you doing, Black Knight? How's it been since the last time we've seen you?
I'm okay. New? I had my my birthday this Sunday, and I continued celebrating Monday because I can.
Yeah,
because I can. I was born almost at the midnight.
Oh, so you're like right there in the border between Sunday and Monday is your birthday. Wow, perfect. 2 birthdays, one after the other. That's a winner.
2 days. So that's like one of the the best things. And then I had plenty of time today to outline, well, not outline, basically draft write the skeleton draft of one entire story. And I managed to write the first chapter, and I posted it. I did some edits, and it will be my next new thing for Terran Tuesday. So this is what I did.
Tell us.
I hope you like it. I think. Oh, hello, Snow. I think you already read it. I think you already read the first chapter.
Ooh.
Nicey, nice. Do you got a piece to share with us?
Yeah. I know he does.
Right. Well, while you look for your piece to share with us, how are you doing, Snow? How have you been since the last time we've seen you?
Oh my gosh, we've been busy. So we've got a new baby goat today. I wasn't sure if I was going to make it because we have a new baby goat, and he's this adorable. I'll have to put a picture on my
goats.
Yes, I know, just a little baby fainting goats. I know, they're so cute. And we're hearing the coyotes come up because they know when new babies are born. And they're actually outside, even though it's daylight outside right now. We're hearing them come up really close. So actually, my son is outside right now playing the Good Shepherd. He's bringing them all into the inner yard where we have the houses and things. And we have like grass growing up in vetch, which is a really pretty purple flower. And so and that's what I posted on my Substack, was the grass blowing in the wind, because I knew the goats are going to come and eat it in a minute. So I was like, I got to get the picture. And so they're going to be coming into the yard. So we're getting them inside so that way the coyotes can't, get to the babies.
Wow, that's nature for you right there. Everything's in competition.
Yep, the coyotes know. I mean, that's what they do. They feed their babies too. So we have to be ahead of them, because we don't want our babies to feed their babies right now. They can go eat mice or something, which they do.
Wow, that sure is something. Yeah. Did you find a piece for us, Black Knight?
A piece?
Yeah, a piece to share with us from your latest release. A little piece, snippet.
Yeah.
From there Substack. Yes, find one. I think we should definitely make that a practice more, to share the little snippets of writing to entice possible readers to see what we come up with, and pull out of our brains and put on digital paper and release until the interwebs.
Yeah,
I guess I can do one too. But we want Black Knight.
Yeah, I can. So I'm not going to spoil the entire chapter. I'm just going to share maybe 3 paragraphs. Yes. I think that would be nice. Well, so this is my brand new series for Terran Tuesday, and everything from now on, everything which I eventually write and a post on Terran Tuesday. It will be under the Terran Tales series. And this new series is titled Lost Numbers. I will not spoil why. You have to read it to understand why. It is set on entirely different place. And if you remember how cheerful the Hamsterkin series was with Little Bloop, who nevertheless boinked with that like electrified bat cyborgs to death or shot them with his tiny shotgun. This one is not going to be that. It's a bit gloomier, though it has exactly the balance of Sword and Railgun, the Star Shattered universe. So, Chapter 1, The Dead Who Fight. In the olden dusty gloom, the stale air heavy with filth, disturbed dangling cables and bits of ragged clothing pranced across corridors full of ancient death. Filtration systems long since beyond any point of repair. Reels of cancerous dust drizzled down from cracked air ducts. Booby traps of many kinds littered the cratered, battle-torn floors, their forever alert triggers hungry for a kill. The bunker once kept safe those who lived within his sturdy corridors and spacious halls, until he could not. For many centuries, the descendants of his creators fought tooth and nail, yet their cannibalistic foe had finally prevailed. Millions fell. Their mummified remains now lay under the thick blanket bunker dust. Eyes hollow and their bony mouths wide open, they screamed one last desperate yell before their torturous demise. Many of them were once the bunker's defenders, Averna child soldiers and youths who gave their lives in battle. The women and babies they failed to protect, whose gnawed, broken bones now piled up to the ceiling, mangled, oftentimes beyond recognition. The bodies of their Yarn enemies were far and in between since their leaders recovered precious combat gear and supplies. Not of some respect for their own dead, no. Their Averna foe would soon proceed to slay them with their own beam guns, vibroblades, and grenades. However zealous these Yarn hunters were, and the debased priestesses who commanded them, many a time they fell in clever ambush or suffered the deathly bite of a trap. Their cloaking shields and nifty gadgets failing to protect them from the killing blow. Nor were their greater numbers cybertech and gene grafts giving them an edge definitive, for they were soulless, their minds rotten, and those who led them rotten still. Only the spirits of the dead had one dared inquire, say how numerous were their ranks.
Hey, not bad.
Woo!
Yeah, you know, people. You say you don't have a good reading voice in English, but I understood that just fine.
It was wonderful. I think it adds beyond.
I think I should read more often.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, read more.
I think it's awesome, and I love it.
Yes, to piggyback off of near the end of your reading there, when you spoke of spirits of the dead, that is a bit of what we're going to be discussing today. Now that we're going to just dive right into our topic. We each go ahead and take turns choosing a topic. This time around was my turn, and I chose hauntings.
Yes.
I was trying to find a nice subject for us to dig into that I thought we could all bring an interesting aspect towards. And I realized the just about every culture and every town throughout at least America and probably across the entirety of the world, cultural wise, I know across the world, town wise, maybe across the world, seems to have at least one local legend or another of a haunting. And they themselves seem to be some of the elder stories that have survived through the works of horror, and also an interesting tool or element that you'll often find in all forms of or all mediums of entertainment as well as literature itself, from subgenres such as romance with like a haunted vibe, or a thriller, or even some comedies. So the idea of hauntings is not only this thing that permeates through cultures, but it's also something that seems to find its way to be woven in to just about every aspect of entertainment, which ultimately I think that's one thing that we're here to discuss, is that for which influences entertainment or the various forms of media that are out there, and that we try to provide our own voices towards. Well, R.H. Snow, I know you got a lot to talk about regarding this subject, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to you.
Well, first of all, it's such a fascinating subject, and I love it. It's one of the reasons we actually start off Watch of the Damned with a ghostly interaction, because even though we are sci-fi, we also have that element of fantasy, and there's something so open and across the border of reality when you step into the world of hauntings, because we all experience in our lives a point where we will encounter death. And when we do, we realize it's a permanent state, that there are things that happen, that the bodies decay and the life is gone from it. But then there's another moment when you turn and you still feel, or you still can sense the presence of something else that has passed from this world, from this mortal body. And whether it's an object of your grandmother's that you've touched and suddenly you can feel her spirit in it, or you actually encounter something that you just can't explain, that you believe is a presence that shouldn't be here because this person shouldn't be alive. That's when we have that experience, and it is an experience that is encountered in every culture across the globe. And this is one of the reasons that I find it so fascinating. This is not just an affectation of one culture of talking about a ghostly spirit, and then the rest of them are like, oh no, well, we never saw that. Much like religion, where people believe that they have encountered the divine at some point. Almost every culture has a point where they believe that they have encountered the dead. Not in this plane, but across that veil into the next. And so we see that this being a universal experience, we have to ask, as thinking people, is this real? Is this more than just, oh, it's a hallucination of somebody having a dream, or somebody woke up and they were hungry, they ate a bad sandwich or something and they suddenly saw something? This has to be more than that. There has to be something to it. And of course, thinking people will ask questions, and then they will be skeptical as well. You were really drunk that night, Johnny. Maybe you didn't really see a ghost. Maybe you were just really, really, really drunk. We have a tendency to want to put it off to, there has to be another reason. But there are elements in everyone's life, in everyone's family. There's a story of a ghost tale, of something that's out there that we don't understand, but we know that there is something that makes the hair on the back of our neck rise up and a shiver go down our spine, because these things shouldn't be here, and yet they are. Texas is full of ghost stories. In fact, we have tales of that actually represented in Watch of the Damned, because I love Texas folklore. And some of these stories have become so ubiquitous that they are repeated throughout the state. You have to ask, one of the things about it is a bridge. Haunted bridges are very common. And in fact, in Mexican folklore, they're very common as well. Bridges are sacred spots. They are usually considered to be a portal to another world, especially the area under the bridge. You have that reflection in the water where it opens up a hole, it looks like. And so you have bridges being these sacred spaces to begin with. Almost every town at some level, especially as you go south towards the Rio Grande, has a story at some local level about a bridge where either a baby is crying and no one can find it, or a woman walking sobbing along the shore near the bridge or across the bridge. And in fact, in our area out here, we have one called Crybaby Bridge, and it's in this. I won't dox myself by giving away the exact location, but Crybaby Bridge is probably repeated at least 3 or 4 times in Texas, where a person hears the baby crying but can't find it, and the story will say that a woman threw her baby off of the bridge because her new lover didn't want the baby, and so she threw it off, and the baby still cries at night, and you can hear this child wailing in the wind. Or the woman that is seen at the bridge frequently is the mother of that child, that she is sobbing looking for her child, or she is the lover who jumped from the bridge and cries because the man she loved no longer loved her and she committed suicide at this place. So those common threads that are in Texas folklore frequently have to do with bridges, roads, and crossroads. Crossroads are considered to be haunted territory as well. They are a place where the pathways meet, and just as it is in real life, it mirrors that other world where it's a lot of times we see in folklore that the ghost world is a mirror of this world, and so the spirits are crossing at that point. And so we see these elements repeat over and over again, especially as Mexican and Texan culture mingle. We have this extraordinary gift of these folkloric tales. And then we have some others that are simply place oriented. And I'll go into a little bit more of those in detail, including some that I've actually have been, I'd say, blessed to witness. And let me say this, that in most cultures, there's considered to be families that have a certain kind of sight or are able to see into the other world. There are people that have, in Scottish culture especially, but also in Irish, the second sight. Mexican culture, that's there as well, people who can see across the veil. And so in my family, we were considered to have second sight. That we never, you don't ever talk about it. Let's put it this way: we are able to see things that other people are not, and we talk about it openly in our family. There are things that I'll share as we get further into this conversation. But familial ghosts, familial things that occur in your family that people say, well, you have the gift, or you are able to see this thing. The person that has that gift before you usually will know it. Will be your grandmother or somebody that will come to you and tell you, don't be afraid. You'll cry. You'll wake up one night. You'll go to her and then you'll tell them, oh, don't be afraid. That is just our family. When you see this, this is what you do. And so those stories and those legends, all the way from global phenomenon to a regional to a local, down to families, there has to be something out there, because this is ubiquitous the world over. No matter where we look, we see these stories and hear these tales and have these amazing recountings that become almost legend in families and in locations and even across the world. And it's so fascinating that sometimes it does get lost in exploitation. People just making up stories, making something scary, putting it on the internet when really they're acting. So go back to these original tales. Look up these folkloric resources that you can find, and you will find these amazing tales out there that have been told for centuries, sometimes for millennia. And when you find them, let that chill go up your spine, because it could be that you might be the next person to witness this event.
Well said. A lot of these stories definitely fall into folklore and legend. And the Black Knight, I know that you said you were afraid to repeat yourself on some of these, but we all know that there's a magnificent and rich culture of haunted places and stories, as well as influences down there that, we all love to hear.
Yes. I mean, as Snow talked about bridges, roads, and crossroads, I couldn't help I remember some of the stories about forests and mountains, because over here it's not the roads that, I mean, yeah, you have plenty of you have plenty of stories about roads. Perhaps not that many about bridges, but roads, probably few. Rivers a lot, quite a lot. Forests, the forests are perhaps the overwhelming number of you have the overwhelming number of stories about forests, and in the case of the forests, it's mostly the ghosts of unfortunate travelers who or others who have been uh, perhaps a bit too naive and foolhardy to attempt to explore the forbidden depths of the forests, and they bumped into things which they shouldn't have seen, and they were unalived, and thus their spirits being chained to these places, these areas, and sometimes they would appear and they would warn people. They would warn travelers, or let's say hunters. They would appear to hunters as they hunt, and they would tell them, no, 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 don't go there. Don't go there, or you will never come back. Or don't look over there, you'll see something which you shouldn't see, and you will never leave the forest. And there are others who chase woodsmen who cut trees. And then there are stories of like entire groups of woodcutters who simply vanished in the forest, and they couldn't find them even with dogs, with search and rescue dogs. So it's yeah, it's a bit different. And then you have these like more malevolent spirits, which let's say there are some who were highwaymen once, and they were hanged, and they were killed for their crimes. They were punished, but they could not, like they were too vengeful. They could not ascend. They could not leave, and so they would continue to haunt the places of their deaths, and sometimes even kill others. But they could not. Usually, they could not kill others just like that. They have to possess someone who is just as evil as them, just as debased as they were before their deaths. And they could then rampage. And in the past, that's what they said. They believed about the serial killers, that the serial killers are actually not normal killers. They are evil to begin with, but to be like this level of evil, this to have this level of malevolence, and insanity, and chaotic vileness in them, they need that extra, that little extra oomph, spiritual oomph, evil spiritual oomph. As for the mountains, oh boy, the mountains, if we do not talk about the fairy tale creatures, the specific creatures, and just talk about ghosts, I think in here, over here, you have an equal amount of hauntings between the forests and the mountains, and especially in mountain passes, because the mountain passes were perhaps the only way to traverse the mountain with some degree of success back in the day. And even now, with the modern roads, there are some passes who are considered cursed. And from time to time, you have like people who are driving their cars and they see people floating over the road or like sitting next to them, and they lose control. They become panicked. They become afraid. They lose control of their car, and they kind of wreck the car and kill themselves, or like barely survive. There are cases of this happening still. But originally, people could only traverse the mountains via these passes, these mountain passes, which were deadly dangerous. You had bandits, sometimes bandits. You had rock slides, pitfalls, and everything, like bears. It was quite dangerous. And people who were lost there, in many cases, it was believed that it was actually them who are causing the new rock slides, and they who are chasing bears and wolves, and even manipulating the bandits to be there and kill more people, so that they would not be alone in their misery. So yeah, that's what I'm
pretty
going
dark
to start with. Yeah.
That's pretty dark, but it also shows, because the connection of essentially what a haunting is, what these specters may be, is heavily connected, obviously, to life and death, which is something that, decades before we were around, was way more common than it is now. To the point where I believe, at least here in Americas, where it was a practice not to name your child until a certain amount of time had passed, because there's just a high probability of them really not surviving. And all of that, just intertwines with what is a haunting or a haunted story. And I remember, actually looked it up right here, that one of the very first haunted stories ever recorded, I believe, was from Rome, 100 AD, which is very amazing. But kind of just showcases how far back these stories actually reach, and how a lot of them, even though of different cultures, are very reminiscent to each other, obviously in tone, as well as just the happenings of the various stories themselves. But I think I cut you off there for a second, Snow. You were going to say something?
Oh, actually, I was going to mention the ghost of Hadrian's Wall. This is one of the oldest hauntings that we have right now that's still being seen. Hadrian's Wall, of course, being the wall in Scotland that was originally put up by the Roman Empire while they were colonizing England. And this ghost has been recorded at least for 1,500 years that we know of, actually, as being physically, somebody has written about this ghost. And they believe that he is still patrolling. As late as 2016, we had a person, actually it would be a photographer, who tried to get a snapshot of what he saw, said that he saw a Roman soldier on the parapets of the wall. And that when he looked up and saw it, it looked like it was real. He wasn't a costumed person or anything else. And he says he got something in the frame, and you can see the outline of the soldier in it. And so he believes that he saw the ghost of Hadrian's Wall. And that wall was put together as a defensive wall to keep out of course, the Picts, who were the Scottish at the time. And so this is one of the oldest ones we have. And yes, the Roman soldiers saw things. They were one of those that would believe in the power of a ghost to do something. So it stands to reason that perhaps one of their own soldiers might still be patrolling the wall, making sure that the wall is safe.
Very much so. That kind of goes into what you were saying about the importance of recording these things. Because I believe that a lot of these stories were actually inspired, even the fictional ones, by actual happenings out there in the crazy big world. But at the same time, I think the interesting thing is how there seems to be both a ton of sightings of ghosts, yet at the same time, their spectral nature and, or I should say, supernatural nature leaves leaves a lot of skepticism amongst folks out there of their existence. But I, for one, actually do believe that there's ghosts and haunted locations all over the place. When I was actually young, talk about repeating ourselves. I said this last time we were speaking of horror. But when I was actually young, my sister actually lived in a haunted location, and just about anybody who went over there after a certain hour would experience one thing or another. And while I was young, there was a litany of horror stories about her home that I basically never wanted to visit for too long. But it was, things floating about. You leave one thing in a certain location, go to the other room, come back, and it's gone. Um, like picture frames that have been hanging up on the wall for weeks just end up falling right off, or the feeling of something crawling underneath your blanket and seeing the sort of like movement beneath the blanket. Then you remove it and absolutely nothing there. So a lot of crazy haunted happenings. And the interesting thing is, she said she moved into the house at first, nothing was happening. Then all of a sudden, all this craziness started occurring at once. And this actually kind of brings me into what I actually like reading about. Say, step away from reality for a moment and let's go ahead and weave in some fiction. Some of the greatest sort of specter and haunted stories, though spooky, gothic, or otherwise, they always weave in a magnificent mystery to solve. And I believe that is also something that our culture permeates, because that is a mystery in itself. You move into a home, and then some weeks pass or some months pass, and then suddenly all this supernatural stuff happens. And in itself, I'm sure, is the plot for many of books and possibly even movies out there.
Yes, that's I kind of used a number of like different stories I heard and read in my childhood, and a bit later as inspiration for the ghostly part, the ghostly aspect of Star Shattered, because I have, as you know, plenty of ghosts. The ghosts are actually objectively proven to be real, and you have devices to scan them, to locate them, actually see them with, meaning that if something spooky is happening, you can whip out the hand scanner, and if you are like skillful enough and know how to recalibrate it, you may see something, but it will be in the shape of data. You will not actually, yeah, it's and in some cases the ghosts, they are quite aware of these devices. They're not stupid, and they can manipulate the devices. They can show you things that aren't there. So even though one could say, oh yeah, you use like science to unravel the mystery of supernatural, no, it actually makes it even more supernatural, or something. I don't know.
Adds in more layers of mystery.
Yeah. And other things which I was able to employ again from the myths, and some of the stories, is that during times of war, and not just, but usually during times of war, certain items can develop a spirit, or a person's spirit can haunt them, become one with them. For example, as you say, Snow with Hadrian's Wall. Who knows how many soldiers died defending it? And many of them probably did not ascend because they're soldiers, and their feeling of duty did not allow them to tear their essence from the wall, from the place of their service, even though they have died so long ago. And in such cases, we have haunted ships. I think the two of you told me stuff about haunted ships, and people who've seen ghosts on ships. There are, even in the new age of aeronautics, there are haunted airplanes. And you remember the stories about the gremlins in the planes?
Yes. Actually, almost every
remember
plane
those.
has a gremlin.
Yeah. And in some cases, people believe that there are some bomber crews who named, I think most of them named their planes, and they personified their machines with women they named them for, or animals or whatnot. And I think it's an even older spiritual tradition, where you had these beings carved and placed on the noses of ships, and the eyes painted on the ships, in the ancient world, on the triremes and biremes. Yeah, this stems again from all of these ancient ghost stories, and it's either for protection against evil ghosts, or to empower the spirit of the vessel itself.
Very interesting stuff. But yes, there's almost I know amongst the military there seems to be an epidemic of haunted places around the world. That's for sure. There's such a litany of actual haunted stories about different locations or places. Particularly, there's also a few that come out of, actually a lot that come out of Hawaii, around Pearl Harbor. They say particularly locations that were used as sort of sick bays or to house the dead seem to carry an eerie aura about them. And years later, some people, this is actually a story I heard about a particular base in Hawaii, around Pearl Harbor, where the soldiers actually didn't like to, at least the night crew did not like to sort of patrol or do their patrols and wait inside the building itself. They had a small shack that they put together, and just sort of like a bucket that they sat on all night, exterior of the building, because they all had strange ghostly events happen around them, well, inside the building. And at 3 o'clock, I believe they said, every single night the base alarm would trip, as if somebody had entered the compound, and no matter where they checked, it was always empty. It was always quiet. So after a while, they just stopped checking and just expected it to happen every single night.
Dude, no, you were talking about ships. One of the ones that I actually have a story about is Mobile. And I'm going to go back here and make sure I've got the right names for it and everything like that. But in Alabama, it's Mobile, Alabama, there's the USS Alabama battleship. famous ship. Everybody loves to go there. I went there. Actually, I was going to see my daughter before she was deployed over to Iraq. And this was during the war. And I had my young son with me. And so we went there. We wanted to see the battleship. And I'm like, this is a great chance to go see it. So we went and went downstairs and saw this magnificent ship with all of these different guns and everything. And my father was a World War II veteran. So I was, and was in fact was in the Navy at the time. He did not serve aboard the Alabama. He served aboard the USS Blue Ridge back when it was actually I think a destroyer class or a transport. And so I was a little bit familiar with, what was, in there, but nothing preparing for just how small it was and how tight the spaces were, even though it's this great big ship. And so as we went down, it was getting close to closing time, actually. And so we were down in the boiler rooms and everything like that. And we were walking through and seeing everything. And as I went by, my son was staring at something, and looked like an empty space. And it was 5 o'clock, and they actually came back to get us, saying the ship is going to be going to be closing down. You need to come out. And the docent went ahead of us. And he came out behind me and said, "Do you see the man?" And I said, "Which man are you talking about?" He says, "There's a sailor over there. But he's standing still like he's frozen. He's over next to a piece of equipment for reading the ship's dials and things like that." He says he's in white. He's wearing a white uniform. And I told him, I said, "Danny, I don't see anything over there. But if you see it, I believe it." And he said, "I see it. He's right there." And so we went in. I took his hand. And I said, "Well, it's time to let him go back to work then." And walked upstairs because I know that somebody's still on duty on the USS Alabama. He's doing his job every night. When this museum closes, there's still a sailor on board who's taking care of business.
Ooh, scary. But thus is the way of these many magnificent stories of old, of the possible souls of old permeating us to this day in these strange and supernatural ways. We actually got Read Out joining us in the chat.
Oh,
Read Out, hi.
Reference to Battle of Mobile Bay, of course, something of a historical reference there as always. Thank you for joining us, dear sir. But hearing these legends, it actually reminded me of oh yeah, I'm sure he does around his area. Let me know if you'd like to join
all of those
us.
Things. In fact,
yeah, I'll shoot you a link, Read Out, and you can tell us about all the many ghosts of Gettysburg. Because
and you were talking stories. That would be fantastic because I love Civil War ghost stories. But before we get to him, you were talking about influences, literary influences. Yeah. One of the underrated gems of a ghost story is actually A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. It's a fantastic read. Right. Read the story. Actually read it. Yes, it can be scary watching it. To read the story, literally, it sends a shiver down my spine even when I am not cold. It is a very scary retelling, especially as Jacob Marley's ghost comes back to talk to Scrooge. And the whole first part of the book is about a haunting and how the house changes and twists as Scrooge goes back into his bedroom and goes back in for the night. And so I think that reading that to get a feel of how to actually tell things that aren't gruesome. It's not about gruesome. It's about how you tell the details. And that affected me so much that it actually, it's not just ghost pacing, it's horror pacing, how you tell something it's the words you use and how you describe it that makes it frightening. It's the way that you set the pace as you make little reveals that makes the difference for your readers when you're telling these scary stories. If you want to know how to tell a ghost story properly, go back and read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens and read especially that first part with Jacob Marley. And I think you'll be absolutely delighted, and you will learn a couple of things about how to tell these tales in such a way that they really are truly spine-tingling for your readers.
Very much true. And as you were sharing that story of yours about the haunted ship and the gentleman still on duty, it reminded me of another horror story, another haunting that people know about, but one that is, interesting enough, a haunting that is used as legend to mask an actual crime. This is an interesting one, and one that most people in the chat, as well as in this room, would have actually known, and that is the Amityville Horror, which I have had the opportunity to work for a man named Mark Gruber, who actually lived in Amityville in the 70s during the event. I believe it was called the DeFeo murders, because the whole story behind Amityville is that a son essentially went throughout his house and murdered his family with a rifle, and then he would be picked up by the police, and I forget his fate specifically, but he was definitely arrested for it. But the interesting thing is, according to this gentleman, Mark Robert, who lived there, and this is something that's a well-known point of conversation, and I guess you can say conspiracy, is that a lot of what people say about it is incorrect, and he believes it was actually a cover-up for a mob hit job. And the reasoning being is that the father, I think his name was Frank, I could be incorrect, actually worked for a local vehicle dealership, a dealership that was owned by a local mobster. And it was well known that a lot of the local judges and police officials would get themselves a brand new car once a year at this dealership as a bit of payment for helping out or looking away. And it just so happened that the father was a bit of the bookie, and he actually, they believe, he actually stole some money and hid it in the home. And there's a lot of small little details in between the stories that is incorrect. Like, most people believe that it was a perfect, lovely home. Nothing happened. According to the legend of Amityville, everyone got along until all of a sudden the sun snapped. But that wasn't the story. In fact, Mark Robert knew the boy himself who pulled the trigger, and he was the most unhealthy boy who actually sold and did drugs at their school. And yeah, he actually has a Amityville baseball cap, because in the 70s he was on the baseball team, and he actually shows that hat off. So you know, a little piece of evidence there. And ultimately, like, it's this huge web of connections that it's hard to go through off the top of my head. But they say, you know, it was a perfect, happy Catholic family. Nothing was going wrong, except for the fact that the father was actually a drunk who would beat his kids. And it was well known that he was a little schizo. He'd go out drunk in the middle of the night and just start praying to a statue of the Virgin Mary at the front of the yard every other night when he was drunk. And he would beat his kids, and his kids would come up with this plan, essentially, his two eldest kids, to just take out the parents. Yet, at least this is what the son DeFeo says initially, yet somehow, some way, everyone dies except for the boy, and they all die in their bed with a shot from a rifle, which makes no sense, because if you shoot a rifle, you're going to wake up an entire household, but everybody's just snoozing in their bed. And after they pick up the kid, it just so happens he looks pretty good before the interrogation begins, and after the interrogation, he got some bruises on his face. So they roughed him up a bit. So there's a lot of these ties to this house in Amityville, and it wouldn't be till years later that this story would start popping up as like a supernatural reason behind all this. But Mark Robert, as well as a few others, truly believe that it was just a mob hit, and the story itself was a means of covering it all up, which, to me, that in itself would make a movie.
No, that's crazy.
The twist. Do you know the twist? The twist was that the mobsters were actually ghost possessed.
Ghost-possessed mobsters. But I definitely had to take a second look at this, because I remember it being quite the compelling story, and I believe he covered it on a live stream he did. I'll have to hunt it down because, it is compelling. And when we think of the haunting stories, we never think of it as actually we do in some means. Like let's tie this very dark and sinister conspiracy in with the cartoon, and it's called Scooby-Doo. That's the reasoning behind most Scooby-Doo episodes. Is exactly that. But now we have a dark, sinister conspiracy in the real world tied to something which you find in a Scooby-Doo episode. So there's an interesting piece of culture for you.
Sweet.
Yes.
So how about you, Black Knight? Here's a question for you. What is because you've written obviously about ghosts, you have cultural influences. What are some of your literary influences when it comes to the supernatural?
There aren't that many. I think the initial ones are from fairy tales, from the Slavic fairy tales. Especially some are from the different stories about Baba Yaga and the spirits who are under her command or just enthralled to do her bidding. And of course, Koschei, the Undying, he is also considered to be he's actually in some of the stories they call him the unpossessed because he had hidden his heart and his his own spirit away so he could not be killed, and thus you can slay him, but you think you will be slaying him, but he will come back because he's the thing what makes him deadable, killable, is not there. And then you have some, let's say, some of the mysteries. There were a couple of really. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but I'm trying to remember things from long ago. And the problem is that most of these are not well known. This is why I mentioned the fairy tales, which most have probably heard of or read some of their sanitized for the West versions, so to speak. But yes, there were a couple of murder mysteries which I read, and I cannot remember at 100%, but these had almost like Scooby-Doo-ish feel to them, which ties into what you talked about, the Amityville stuff, where ghosts were used, or stories about ghosts or something similar, which was used to cover someone's crimes. And then we get to the Hound of Baskerville, which was perhaps one of my most favorite stories about Sherlock Holmes, because it was seriously spooky. I don't know if you guys agree, but as a kid, this was seriously spooky, and I honestly believed in the beginning when I read the first part of it. I honestly believed that there was that Sherlock Holmes would have to face and somehow deal with a spectral hound.
Very interesting. I actually haven't read that one on Sherlock Holmes, but I heard of it.
Oh, it's good. Good.
I'll have to pick that one up then. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of dark and ethereal stories out there. But we should have Readout joining us in a moment. I was talking to him on the back end, so he'll be joining us up here in a moment, and I'm sure he's got a lot more crazy stories to tell. But an interesting one.
Oh yeah.
An interesting one, real story, very quick one actually, is my old high school I went to was an old military base, and a lot of the drama students believe that the auditorium where the stage is that they practice is haunted because of just sort of things moving about and things falling down unexpectedly, and just a lot of not so reasonable occurrences happening. But I think the idea of a haunted school is probably something that is quite common across the states.
Yes, it actually is, and in fact, you'll find those. I was just looking up one of my favorite websites, actually, which is hauntedplaces.org. And I was talking earlier about the woman at the bridge. Bridges being very famous for being. I looked up Crybaby Bridge just as a name, just as a general search. And Crybaby Bridge, so many different places have a Crybaby Bridge. It is just insane. There's page after page of Crybaby Bridges everywhere. But I found a actual place name in Texas called Woman Hollering Creek. And reading from hauntedplaces.org, which is where we go, and you actually can go by state and region. And it actually is named Woman Hollering Creek. When you cross the bridge, it's on there, and it's after the La Llorona myth. And so the La Llorona is the woman that is weeping. And so she is especially along the Rio Grande, we start to see a lot more of these stories. And it's the same story that it always is, that she drowned her child, and that she is now weeping and searching for it for all eternity at this bridge where she cast it in. And this story goes back far enough that it becomes a place name here. It's outside of Sheriff's, Texas. And so we know that these stories have been out there, and a lot of people will swear that they have gone to this place and actually heard the woman crying. And it has comments down here talking about how they heard the woman crying at the bridge and weeping, and that you should not try to approach her, because if you do, that she will pull you in. And so you always want to stay away and give those ghosts their space, because they are working out their sin, so to speak, at that point, and in that place.
Ooh, nice and creepy. But joining us on the back end, we have Readout Productions. How you doing?
It's so spoopy in here.
Yes.
Hey,
it's only April. We're not even to October yet.
Not even there, but spooky season came early. And I know you mentioned before that Gettysburg is quite the haunted place. We'd love to hear some of those stories.
It should be mega haunted.
Yeah, so I will say as a disclaimer, everybody always will come up to me and try to start chatting the paranormal. I am not I'm not going to say I'm the ultimate skeptic. I am so apprehensive about discussing paranormal stories, especially so close to the same breath of historical stories, has no fault of individuals. I will always say when an individual swears they've seen or experienced, I can never take that away from them. I'm not going to debate beliefs. Unfortunately, the community of Gettysburg has one licensed battlefield guide agency, and there's a reason for it, so the people given the tours, they've gone through exhaustive exams to confirm they know what they're talking about when they take the public around these hallowed grounds. One battlefield license guide group. There got to be at least a dozen, if not more, different paranormal groups active in Gettysburg at the same time on one night. I have seen in the periphery 4 ghost tours going on simultaneously in the periphery. Maybe a little excessive. So sometimes I get a little worried. That being said, of course, there are many stories that people have left over 160 years. The one that always comes to my mind, if there's a building that you go and you're just like, yeah, this is a little creepy. It's not something you'd expect. And it ain't the big ones. It's a place known as the Orphanage. Has anybody ever heard of the Orphanage at Gettysburg?
Yes.
I haven't.
Okay, so it's not technically a structure from the time of the battle. These were built like late 1860s, but it is tied to the Civil War. Long story short, a Civil War soldier who was killed at Gettysburg. Oh, it's like an Amos. I want to say it's Amos Hutchinson, but I could be wrong on that. I know his first name was. Was I right? Because it does start with the. So, anyways, soldier was killed during the American Civil War. Yes, it was Amos Humiston, I believe it was.
Good.
He is killed at the Battle of Gettysburg. For weeks, nobody could identify his body.
Oh, wow.
Interesting stuff.
Search. They eventually figured it out, and now, unfortunately, these 3 kids were orphaned. And therefore, that kind of spurred the idea of creating an orphanage for children orphaned by the American Civil War at Gettysburg. And I believe it was open in 1866. It was open right after, just a few years after the battle, year after the war ends. It was located on the south edge of town. And there was like a male dormitory, a female dormitory, and those structures are standing. And I believe there's actually a photograph of Ulysses S. Grant actually visiting the orphanage in like 1867. It's one of the only photographs of an operation. Unfortunately, things went very sour very quickly with the orphanage. Yeah. Children were disappearing, or children that are walking through town were showing up with bruises. Sometimes children were being sheltered, would spend very long times after hours in other people's houses because they did not want to go back to the orphanage. And this went on until the 18.
You're breaking up there a little bit. I think you cut off.
We had a little weather today.
Oh, yeah.
Hold on. Am I coming in better now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So they found a kid. He was abused, and they figured out what was going on. Eventually, it was found that the headmistress was abusing many of the kids. There was rumored to be kids chained in the dungeons for punishment for long hours. Like they had a dungeon in the basement. They had them shackled just for punishment, just to be set there days without end, without food. And over the years, the orphanage, of course, closed. The buildings have become a bunch of different things. At one point, I could be wrong. I think this was the building that, I kid you not, David Arquette's grandfather had a museum running out of. Yes, that David Arquette. Yeah. Yeah, the buildings have an interesting history, even though without the battle.
A few things beat a spooky orphanage.
Yeah, it's you go in there and it's just I've never had an experience personally, but it's one of the few buildings in Gettysburg that, for me, who's pretty skeptical on certain paranormal stories, it goes in like, yeah, I don't like being in here. There's just something wrong.
Yeah, you can feel it. We're electromagnetic creatures, and science agrees with that. We actually there has to be some way that we're leaving that imprint, because my mother was one of those people. She was a real estate agent. She could lay her hand on a wall and tell you if a murder had taken place in there. She knew. She absolutely knew. She didn't have to read about it. This is back in the 70s, before we had internet or anything like that. And she would absolutely know where there was something bad had happened in the house. So it seems like it imbues, there's something left behind for people perhaps that are able to experience that. And having witnessed her do that is just, there's no explanation. It's just somehow she was able to do these things. And she would tell us, you don't want to, this is not a place you need to live. And sure enough, later we'd find out that it would be like, that's house is where a murder took place or something like that. And so, yeah, people will feel those things. And I know that with my father, and I will say this, it's become very popular. The paranormal phenomenon has become very popular with reality TV, especially. And now we have YouTube. That means that people go out and they have all these teams, and they're going out and whether or not they're actually getting anything on there, a lot of it, may be manufactured just for clicks. Things that wouldn't normally be even scary to you are suddenly scary because they use lighting and they say, oh, I feel this thing. But my father and I visited Gettysburg in the early 70s. And we went actually to Vicksburg at one point, went to Gettysburg. It's an incredible experience. I will tell you that he himself, as he would wander the grounds, he would say, this is a place of the dead, that we don't do anything disrespectful. And he would never allow anyone, and you still aren't, you're not allowed to pick up even a mini ball or anything like that. You can't touch things. But we spent a lot of time just looking at these monuments and walking around. And my father said that he was one, both of my parents said they were scientists. My mom studied physics. She was the first woman to study physics at University of North Texas. My father worked on the Saturn V rocket. He was a scientist. He still could see the dead, that he would feel something near him. And as a soldier, he was very intimately aware of the smell of smoke in battle, and he said he could smell the smoke. That report, back when people even didn't really talk about it as much, and we just certainly didn't have the phenomenon of going crazy. And, I see this thing. There's a certain amount of mass hysteria that takes place when people read about it over and over again, so they really believe it's happening, even if they're not seeing it. When you're there and you can experience it with my own father, who was certainly not a person for hysteria and really didn't have a whole lot of stories about it out even at that time yet, it was a very powerful place to be as a person aware of those things. And to hear my father say, I can smell the smoke. To walk gently here. These are the homes of the dead. This was a very unusual thing for him to say. We always try to be very respectful of the dead, but this battlefield in particular was very haunting. And I think that everyone should always treat it with respect that is due, because you never know, somewhere on the other side of that, the battle is still ongoing. In a non-linear temporal state, this moment is forever for someone. And so I think that whether or not you believe in string theory with, physics or other worlds or any other thing, or the memory imprint, whatever you want to call it, there's something that takes place in some of these places where the spirit is so overwhelmed with a terrible event or a traumatic event that it seems to leave a print on the face of time itself. And you can feel that angst or that fear and still taste it. And I know that Gettysburg is one that is notoriously, for people that have said they experienced something, that certainly they feel like it happens at Gettysburg. The Alamo is another one that is like that. And I've been at Alamo several times since I was a child, and I actually have relatives that died at the Alamo. William Wolfe and his two sons were married to my aunt, great aunt, Victoria Durst Towson. And she laid claim to it. They said, you, for whatever reason, they denied her. She was still living in Louisiana, had remarried, I believe. And to be in that place, once again, there's this point in the day where the museum closes. And it's always been a busy area. Believe it or not, even back in the days before it really became established as a shrine of Texas history, it was surrounded by shops. It was, all sorts of wild things going on. There are people, partying up and down the street. There's something that happens when you walk into that church, and people still are encouraged, very much so, to remain silent, to be quiet and be respectful in there, because it is a church, and it is, once again, the home of the dead. They are, buried just down the street, actually, at another church nearby. But this is the home of their last remains, as they fell to the ground, defending what would later become Texas. And so as you walk in, and you can literally feel in that house as the darkness is falling, and the giant oak trees are out there. And yes, the grounds have changed, and it's been changed. And they're actually renovating it right now.
I've heard. I'm looking forward to what their ultimate plans are.
Going to find some incredible stuff. There has always been that it is sacred ground in Texas. Our people still treat it as such. It is solely in the purview of Texas itself, so it can't be sold or given away to someone or turned into another park of some kind. It is about Texas history and Texas liberty. And so as you go in, and we would walk the grounds, and my father was a huge supporter of Texas history in particular, and he loved everything about Texas history. And he would walk through, and the back rooms where the battle actually was the most fierce was in the barracks. And as you entered the barracks, it took about 90 minutes, I believe, for the soldiers to kill everyone inside. And that place is so traumatic to me even today. But at the time, my father, they didn't have the displays set up as the way they were. and he could just walk by and say that you could literally feel this angst of this terror of fighting for your life. You know you're going to die. There's no way out of this, but you're just fighting anyway. And so as an adult, I got to visit these things for the first time, and I was amazed at how there are places that are lit to make them seem scary. There, lights are lowered and shadows are deliberately created to make things look scarier than they are. This is not the case in the Alamo. Certainly, it's well lit. The grounds are beautiful. It's a place of peace for the most part. The barracks still bother me greatly, and it's because very little has been changed in there. They've put it back the way that they believe that it was closest to the actual area, and the smallness of the area and the closeness and the fact that there's no
What happened?
Cut off there a little bit.
Did we lose Snow?
Sorry. Yeah. We may have lost her there for a second. Maybe she'll.
Well, she began talking about the Alamo, and I read some things, some articles about the Alamo. I was not able to go there when I visited the US. I was first I was at New York, and then I went to South Carolina, and I never had the chance to go, even though it is on my list of places to go. But from what I read in these articles, and I did watch that super famous movie, the old one, not the new one, the older one. Yes. I got the idea that this is a different it's quite the different kind of war haunting, if you can even call it like this. It falls under the sacrificial war hauntings in my classification, because the people there, they knew that they're doomed. They absolutely realized it, even though everyone still has like some little tiny sliver of hope. In their heart of hearts, they knew that they were dead, and they kept fighting still. So they self-sacrificed. And to give you an example, because I was never there, and I couldn't have felt what Snow have and others have maybe felt. There is a place here in Bulgaria. There was a mountain pass where during the Russian-Ottoman War, the war for the liberation here, there was part of this pass which was defended by a militia, as one of our first units formed during this time, and they actually died. They knew that they are going to die, but if they could hold this pass, and they could hold it for as long as they could, then the reinforcements would arrive, and the enemy would be crushed. Basically, they would be too by attacking this part of the pass, which was perhaps the most vulnerable part. it was a dangerous gamble. If they could break through, if they could achieve a breakthrough, they would have been almost impossible to stop. But if they couldn't, then they opened themselves to being enveloped, and that's what happened. Basically, these militiamen, they fought there. They used all of their ammunitions. They most of them were left with bayonet and their bare hands. And when their bayonet snapped, they began throwing rocks. But strange as it is, even on mountain top, there comes a time when all the throwable rocks are thrown, and then you grab the bodies of your friends and your comrades, and you throw the bodies, and then you throw yourself. But they stopped them, and this is the pass is called the Shipka Pass. And you can.
Okay, I've heard of that. I was wondering if that, because I'm like, I know of a pass involving Bulgarian volunteers. I'm like, is that the one we're thinking of? Okay,
is that the one? Yes, this is the one. And I went there, and I can tell you that I felt something, but it was not ominous. It was more like wholesome spooky. When I went there, I felt reinvigorated. I felt stronger even. And you could, I mean, there are a couple of people there who know exactly where everything happens, and they can show you, they can pinpoint where they fought and how they moved back and forth, because they kept charging down the slope for a time. They kept charging because they still had bayonets, and they would charge, and they would kill the Turks, and they would grab their guns and their ammunition. But that worked only for so long, and then they could charge no longer because they were wounded, they were bleeding, they were dying, they couldn't run. So it's a place where, I mean, maybe if you're a Turk, if you go up there, you will feel you will not feel the same. But for me, it was, I felt great. I felt really great.
Interesting story for sure. We got about 10 minutes left. Anybody got some long form stories they want to share? Snow, are you back? You rejoined us? Looks like she's got some bad connections on her end. Hopefully I'm coming through. All right, but read out. Or wait, no, Snow, you there? I see you turning your mic on and off. I don't think I see her or hear her. Can you hear her, Black Knight, at all?
No, I can't.
Oh, shoot.
Yep. Complete silence.
Perfect time to have some light microphone issues.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There you go. I thought I heard your voice there.
Okay, for a cool. No, that's good. Actually, yeah, I sorry, I had to go in and do an internal on it, try to make it fall over. Is Readout still with us?
I
think we just lost him.
Yeah, he just may have fallen off the stream there.
Oh, okay. There is one thing I wanted to is a story I want to tell because it fits in. Then I'll do a reading. I'll do a reading because it fits in with this. So when he was talking about, and you were talking about that spirit of sacrifice and stuff, we get to that point where the hauntings become elevated, where when we talk about these stories, that they become more than just a man dying or there's a ghost there. It becomes a spirit of a certain entity, a certain freedom, perhaps, or of justice, or of love, and it becomes this almost a divine interaction with human beings to this great heroic act. And one of those actually goes back to the Alamo itself. Just a few days after the Alamo, it's a story that a lot of people don't know, but it is historically has been told. Not only has been told, but people point back to a particular general. And so we can actually look this man up. Shortly after the Alamo, the bodies were all taken out. Everything was taken away. And many of them were buried at a church nearby. Others may have been dumped into the river where there was a giant burning and then the bodies just pushed away. Mexican General Juan Jose Andrade was at camp, and he sent a colonel with a contingent of men because they had received orders from Santa Anna to burn the Alamo, to burn it all down. That he wanted nothing left because he wanted people to know he had been there, and that this was considered to be an act of war. He was going to have it burnt down. So General Andrade sent his contingent of men to go burn the Alamo. Part of it was because they didn't want to have disease, and also because it was considered to be a bad place. When they came up on scene, they saw before them a very strange sight. It appeared that the church was already on fire. As they approached, they saw it was not the church itself, but the figures of what they said were 6 men who were holding fire in their hands. They called them Los Diablos. They froze in their tracks, unable to even move. The men were so shaken, they returned to General Andrade saying they would not do this act because the church was being protected by these 6 Diablos. General Andrade, naturally knowing that he didn't want to cross Santa Anna, who at this time was actually moving across Texas during the runaway scrape, he goes himself to go burn this church down, to go ahead and get rid of it, to get rid of all these things and to fulfill his orders. And when he comes up to the Alamo, he sees once again, just 6 days after the battle, he sees a man standing before him with fire in his hands, enveloped in flame, guarding the church, and 6 others like him, standing around, the 6 Diablos, protecting the Alamo. No one has seen them since, but the church was not burned, despite the orders that went out. The Alamo still stands. And that leads me to the poem that I wrote this week, and I'm going to read it for you. It's from my own Substack, and of course I have it also in my, excuse me, I have it also at my Twitter page if you want to see it. But I'd like to read it to you. It's called Legends Are Real. Legends are real when you're living in Texas. By R.H. Snow, April 26, 2025. The trail riders rode by my ranch yesterday. My neighbors on horseback, clip-clopping away, invoking the stories of old as respects us. Legends are real when you're living in Texas. Cowboys still ride and the Alamo stands where waters roll wide as the old Rio Grandes fight to be free as the good Lord directs us. Legends are real when you're living in Texas. It's hotter than hell and it's colder than ice, but those 3 days of spring seem awfully nice. Hailstorms bring twisters as nature inflects us. Legends are real when you're living in Texas. We watched the trail riders right out of our sight, and I couldn't help but to whoop with delight. Joy in this beautiful world that reflects us. Legends are real when you're living in Texas.
Oh, that's a nice little one right there.
And the truth is, I have a video of this trail ride. This trail ride actually comes right by my house every year, and it's not a show. It's not a carnival that's taking place or a reenactment. It's my neighbors. They have covered wagons, and they go down the road, and they go to the local little park that we have, Springfield Park, where they will gather for the day, and they live down the street from me with their wagons and their horses. I've actually had a cattle drive go by my house, and it's always exciting to see that. But in the end, the most spooky thing I've ever seen was to look up on a clear morning where there was no fog or anything else, but it was the anniversary of the Parker kidnapping, where old Fort Parker was raided by the Indians. And the Indians actually had camped out near my house before the raid. And that morning, as I look out, I see mist rise out of the pond. The pond had been built afterwards, but a spring had been there, and you can still see it bubbling up when it rains in the middle of the pond. The mist rose out of the pond, and I see it boil over into the pasture next to me, and I watch it as it marches away towards the destination of old Fort Parker. And Quanah Parker will come from this. A man of peace will bring the two worlds together, both white and Native American, and he will save his people. And I like to think that maybe that's a reenactment of that moment. But to see it with my own eyes and to know that date and what it meant still kind of brings a chill to my spine, knowing that along that pathway, the future and the past met, right there in my back pasture in Texas.
Definitely epic history right there, if I ever heard it. But with a short time remaining, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up with where we can find you and final thoughts on the subject matter. We'll start off with our spontaneous guest, Readout Productions.
Yay! Oh no.
We can't hear you, Readout.
Oh, I'm right on the mic.
Oh, here you are.
There you go.
Are.
Oh, I'm here.
Yes.
I got a new mic about a month ago, so I'm still getting used to it, and I'm trying not to blow anybody's eardrums out. So I'm trying to find the nice happy balance. What I will say is, like I said, I'm very skeptical when it comes to the paranormal, when it comes to at least scientific proving of it. I will never dispute an individual story. What somebody experiences, I wasn't the one who experienced it. So if they say that's what they experienced, I will 100% believe what they experienced. Media has been influenced by so many great spooky stories. More often than not, the mainstream media usually takes one little ounce of that story and then makes something that's almost entirely unrelated. But you got to love ones too that take these legends and are really into legend building and kind of use that to make.
We lost him again.
He has a fantastic YouTube channel, and you need to go sign up. Okay. Readout Productions, real history, real time. Go there. Go to Readout Productions on YouTube and subscribe and like. He's fantastic.
That's his channel. You back, Readout? We heard you there for a sec. Oh, he's probably going to try to rejoin us again. But as he does, Black Knight, final thoughts where people can find you.
Well, as for final thoughts, I think that if people would to visit all of these different places, many of which are considered haunted, some are pretend haunted, some are perhaps, as you said about Amityville, cover-ups, which later their stories later found a life of their own. People should make their own, like, they should judge for themselves. It's fun to laugh at, let's say, if you're a skeptic. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of people who overdo it or actually say things because they want to, let's say, sell you a tour or something, and this is how they make their money. I mean, it's fine, and if you're entertained and they are not grifting you hard, but go there if there is a place in your area and there are stories about it, and people are talking about it, and that they've seen ghosts and things, strange, spooky things are happening. Go there yourself, see for yourself, and then you will judge for yourself. As for where you can find me these days mostly on Substack. This is the Black Knight Substack.com, where you can read all of my current brand new stories. And of course, you can find my Star Shattered series on Amazon, and all the different newer books which I've already published, my 2 anthologies. The latest is titled Blood of Tyrants, and my brand new fantasy, shadow fantasy, old school fantasy book, Lord of Bones. So that's that.
Nice. We did get a message from Readout. Long story short, legends inspire, create stories, though it's up to the storyteller how they will interpret it to a wider audience. The best ones make it unforgettable. And he also said, and don't remove headstones without respectfully relocating the remains also.
Thank you.
Bad things happen when you only remove the headstone.
Yes, that's a bad choice.
Indeed. Now, R.H. Snow, where can people find you and your final thoughts?
You can find me at watcherthedam.com, where I sell my Texas-based post-apocalyptic near-future Western. And it has a lot of Texas folklore, Texas history, and of course, Texas ghost tales as well, including some from the past and some from the story itself. And you can also find me on Substack, just like Black Knight, where he has the Substack, at rhsnow.substack.com. And I, of course, write my series, write for Substack, and have my own YouTube channel there. And I love talking about this old stories. You're right that a lot of it is exploitative, that now we're seeing so many people that will just make things up. And with the advent of AI, I find that the oral storytelling and the history and the traditions of these stories need to be given in a respectful way, and one that doesn't embellish just for clicks or for likes, but instead to tell the stories that have been told by our ancestors, even if it has grown up on its own or if it is actually authentic. The hauntings and the visions that people see are all part of our common culture and our heritage.
Well said indeed. We are 3 minutes past the half-hour mark where we usually end it. My name is James Esparza. Thank you all for joining us. If you're watching this on the replay, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment. But with that said, we are going to get out of here, and we'll see you all next Tuesday, same time, same channel. Bye-bye now. Have a good one, and thank you all for joining us, including our guest, Readout Productions. Hopefully we'll have them on for a full planned conversation next time. But later, everybody. Thanks again. Bye-bye.